First game preview of the year, FSU versus Georgia Tech. Now make sure you have your clock set. Dublin, Ireland, a little bit ahead of us. So it's going to be a night game over there, but it's a 12 Eastern time kickoff for us. Right now, the odds presented by FanDuel on this game. Florida State minus 10.5. You got a total in the mid-50s, 55.5. Now I know to many of you, myself included, this seems sort of like an ambush spot. And if you think it through and you know the teams at all, you're thinking Georgia Tech had a ton of program energy at the end of last year. They had nearly a 14-point per game increase offensively from 2022 to 23. So, I mean, that trend, maybe not that steep, but it seems to continue this year. Offensive line is one of the strengths of this team. Haynes King at quarterback is back. They led the ACC in rushing last year. One of 6 quarterbacks, by the way. King was one of 6 quarterbacks in the ACC. Actually, check that, all of college football, to throw for 25 and to run for 10 scores. So there's a lot that's back for a team that showed a lot of promise last year. Conversely, you had a lot of departures to the draft with Florida State, not the least among them Jordan Travis. So DJ Uiagalelei, not an unknown commodity, very proven, been consistent in his production over the last 2 years. We're getting him in there. We ask ourselves the whole truck versus trailer concept. Some guys can pull other guys up to a different level. Other guys need to be pulled up to another level. Well, when it comes to Florida State at quarterback and their wide receivers, which one's which? And so, yeah, I could see that being an ambush spot. Certainly, if you're going to catch Florida State, you want to catch them early this year. Or do you? I'm not so sure I buy into that. Florida State's got a shot to go down here. I don't know that I just automatically want to play this team early. So the reason I say that is a couple of fold. Florida State, I think, has more ways to suck the life out of this game. Their defensive line should be able to match up with the strength of this team. Georgia Tech's strength's offensive line should be able to be a good matchup there. Love Florida State up front. Florida State's defense in general should be able to win them games early this year. If they need to buy that offense time, I think they can do it. Their run game should be able to, over 4 quarters, give them the physical edge over Georgia Tech. They've got better athletes than Georgia Tech. They have recruited and portaled to the degree that they can lose the kind of talent they lost and still be a very, very high-level, formidable opponent. DJ, 3rd and 5+ is probably my most interesting sort of stat bucket for this game. If Georgia Tech finds a way to just force him to be in obvious passing downs on 3rd down, that's where you take your shot. Okay, that's where you push this game out into the deep end a little bit. Because if it's very fundamental, it's very easy to see Florida State's favored by double digits for a reason. But if you make it uncomfortable, that's a stat category that you could do some business in. Now let's take a look at what we think, what the model thinks. We see what FanDuel thinks. So the model here, we have our own model. Welcome back to college football here. We have our own model. We've got Florida State minus 12.5. So we think the opening line was right. Probably open like 13.5. We think that was more in line with what it should have been. It's come down. It's been bet down. There's been a lot of money, I think, probably on Georgia Tech, and that may not be done. We'll see. I think some late Florida State money will come in here. I'm actually going to be with you. I'm not betting against Mike Norvell in an opener. Have we not learned our lesson here? I also don't necessarily know how to quantify being able to bottle up, being totally overlooked for the playoff last year, but I don't think it's irrelevant. There's a lot of pent-up anger and frustration to the point where you're not catching that program on its heels to start the season. If you beat them, you're going to have to go play a better football game than them. I'm not sure Georgia Tech will. I think Florida State will win this. It's a competitive game, not a blowout game, but I think over the span of 4 quarters, kind of tack on a late score, Florida State wins this, and I think Florida State covers as well. Okay. We'll be breaking down a ton of games next week this time.